Oh, it's fine. Um, how many people saw my presentation last time? Okay. I've changed quite a few things, but I've kept some things the same just for newcomers. So just a little bit of a background. I was doing invasive plant surveys for Heart of the Gila along just basically, I think I've done about 85% of the trails in the wilderness the last few years, but the first season I did it, I was going down Iron Creek, the Iron Creek Mesa Trail, and I came across this scene here. This is the largest population of Graham's thistle in New Mexico, and there's about 3,000 plants in this meadow here, and this is the spot to see Graham's thistle if you want to see it. It's the easiest one to access. The other ones are progressively harder and harder. But so I'm going to talk briefly about Graham's thistle research this year. I'm going to talk a little bit more about all of the species we have in this region, because like everything in Southwest New Mexico, we have an abundance of diversity. We have 11 species in this area. And then I'm going to cap it off with the trip to the Mogollons that we did this year. And we were looking for a new species of thistle that, potential new species of thistle that I found last year up on Mogollon Baldy. And this here is the other. So in 2022, I found the population at Iron Creek, and then this one here at Turkey Feather Spring. And this one is the most isolated. I think it's also the most beautiful. So if you ever get to go out there, I highly recommend it. If you go in July or August when it's flowering, it's really spectacular. There's orchids and all kinds of stuff. And so just a brief refresher on what a thistle is. So they're all asters, they're in Carduiae. There's 3 genera, Cirsium, Cardus, and Onoportum. And in the US, we mostly have Cirsium and a little bit of Cardus that was introduced. And thistles are all spiky. I think that's what we all know them for. And they often are not fun to deal with if you have them in your garden. They spike you and might step on them as a kid and not like them the rest of your life. But I'm here to tell you that they're an amazing an amazing plant that is incredibly important for pollinators. And as far as individuals go, there can be quite a bit of variation, and sometimes they're hard to ID, but generally there's good characteristics for IDing them in the field. But I'm going to go into like why they're so important for pollinators, and it has a lot to do with their life history. And just a little brief background on parts of a thistle. So you've got your florets, your inflorescence at the top there with all the color, leaves, stems. Your involucre is that nice cup-shaped thing that's kind of armed with phyllaries, those spiky little scales. The inflorescence at the top. Basically, you have this cup that's just full of, can be over 100 tiny little flowers called florets, and they're fully functional flowers. They have corollas. This is where the pollinators come in, and why they're so great for pollinators are, you, instead of going from flower to flower, expending all this energy, they just come to this one-stop shop, and they can pick through each flower and spend almost no energy doing so. And one of the other reasons they're so bountiful with energy is they typically have a 2-year cycle. And so their first year, they're often rosettes, which these are all Graham's thistle rosettes here. This is an early one here. It hasn't even, the leaf hasn't even split. These light green ones here are also, you can see how dense the florets are. And that first year, they just spread out kind of like a satellite dish. try to take up as much room as they can, soak in the rays, and then drive all that energy into their roots for their second year. When they pull all that energy out, they flower, and hopefully they make as many florets as possible, because each one of those can become a seed. But that 2-year cycle it's not just like an annual flower. They've got 2 years to put all that energy into a high energy source. And so I was just going to briefly cover the thistles we have in this area. I'm going to kind of go in chronological order. Some of these photos are from Gila Flora, but this here is our New Mexico thistle. This is the first thistle you tend to see in the year. They've got the main features of this plant are this light green color. They've got this really pale green color, and then this really light pinkish purple inflorescence. They also have these cobwebby involucres, and their spines tend to kind of droop. They're long and droopy. But if you see a flower, or if you see a thistle like on the side of the road in like maybe March or April, and it's this light color, this is probably what you're seeing. The other one I often see early that's often on the roadside is the yellow spine thistle, Cirsium ocrocentrum, and they've got these magenta, pretty broad inflorescence, very, very spiny, kind of intimidating looking. And these spines are often yellow. You can see it's got yellow spines here on the involucre as well. And I'll see them flower all the way into July or August, but it's usually early season. This is one I don't see often, but I feel like we could have both of these subspecies here. This is Arizona thistle. And one of the main features of this is the corolla lobes are really long. Kind of reminds me of like fiber optic cables. And the other feature is they're only hairy on the underside of the leaf. And then also on the involucres, as you get towards the base, they tend to kind of peel off like this. And that's kind of unique to these guys. This Arizonicum is typically what we have here, but I feel like this is not too far away in Arizona. I feel like we could have this at lower elevations, but the species we have here is mostly in ponderosa pine or pine and oak forest. And then we have our 2 yellow thistles, and we have Perry's thistle and Gila thistle. And the Gila thistle is much rarer. It tends to grow in riparian zones, typically above 7,000 feet. So that's this one here in the middle is Gila thistle. And the main features of that are it's got 1 flower per stalk, whereas these Perry's thistles on the left and the right, they tend to have more than 1 flower head per stalk. And you can find Perry's thistle all the way up to the peaks. So it grows in areas that aren't just riparian in nature. And Wheeler's thistle is so when I'm doing the Graham's thistle research, this is the thistle I tend to see right outside of the Graham's thistle area. So as soon as it goes from wet soil to dry, I usually see these guys, and they have these very shiny, elongate leaves. They're really noticeable even when they're rosettes and you don't have flowers, but they're kind of spindly and thin. They've got this light pinkish purple color. And those are also in ponderosa typically. This is one that actually isn't on Gila Flora, but I've found a couple of them in various places. They tend to be riparian as well in ponderosa fir areas. But this is curly-leafed thistle, and they look pretty similar to Wheelers. They look kind of similar to Arizona thistle, but if you look at the filaries here, they've got this pronounced central glutinous ridge here, this kind of white line on each one of the filiary scales. And they, otherwise they're pretty hard to tell apart, but I'd be interested if other people find this one because I've only found it in a couple spots, but it should be around here. And then that leaves us with the two bad thistles. They're cool, but they're not supposed to be here. So this is bull thistle here. And the main way I identify bull thistle is, since I'm also looking for rosettes, is just this intense, almost like evil green color here. It's really dark, and it's a color you don't see on any other thistle species. And there's other like more, scientific ways to identify these guys. But if you look at the involucre here, just really armed with tons and tons of spines. It's got this cobwebby appearance as well. And then the inflorescence, they tend not to open up like the other thistles. They kind of stay narrow, and it's that deep purple. And these guys can have, over 100 flower heads on one plant. So they're very vigorous. And this picture here is actually a Graham's thistle rosette that's being basically completely encapsulated by a bull thistle. And it's likely because this gopher here created enough disturbance that the bull thistle was able to come in, because I feel like their seed bank is basically everywhere in the forest now, and they're kind of just waiting for that like heavy disturbance to really take over. But anytime I see this, I do remove the bull thistle, because the Graham's thistle has very little habitat to survive. And then the last invasive thistle we have is the musk thistle. And it's not in too many areas yet, luckily, but in places like the Sacramentos and other parts of the state, it's really abundant. In the Gila, it's kind of up on Bursum Road and on the Tularosa mostly. It's a really beautiful thistle, but really massive flower heads. And then the involucre here, you can see, is very different from your other. It's a cardus, so it's not a Cirsium, but you can see it just has a very different look to it. And then that leaves us with Graham's thistle. And so that this is what I've been researching the last couple of years. And the main features of Graham's thistle is you've got this deep purple involucre here, and then this kind of pink to dark purple flower head, red stem, very hairy underside of the leaf. When they're younger, they're this light green color. Here's a close-up view of the involucre here. It's got a central glutinous ridge, but it's not white, it's deep purple. And here's some more photos. This is a really young one here. So before they actually put out their florets, they're actually green, and the central ridge is white. So there's a bit of variation. If you catch them early like this, you might not actually know that it's a Graham's thistle, but habitat, which I'll go over here in a minute, should be key. Here's just another image. These leaves are just so bright. When you flip them over, they're almost blindingly white. And so where are Graham's thistle populations in the US? And this is pretty much it here. So a lot of the mountain ranges in southeastern Arizona. Our closest population outside of the state is in the Apache sitgreaves, where it often hybridizes with some other thistles. But what we have in New Mexico, we've got these 4 spots. So last year it was just 2. This year there are 2 more. So we'll go over those in a minute. But with the Graham's thistle project thus far, I've spent 13 just solid days where I'm only looking for the thistle, which has been over 135 survey miles. like I mentioned with the Heart of the Gila invasive plant surveys, I've walked at least 450 miles in the wilderness doing that. So I've covered a large chunk of available real estate. When I do find the plant, my protocol is I count in these 10-meter circles how many plants I find, and I do that by rosettes and by flowering plants. And then I check for weevil threats and record wildlife use. And so this is a map here. This is my map from last year. These were all areas I did in 2021, 2022. And then this year I focused on these new areas. Middle Fork, Bear Wallow area, Mogollon Creek, the East Fork, and Apache Creek and Brannon Park. And I tried to focus on riparian zones because this plant does not grow anywhere except in moist soil. And this is just the total of all of the areas, but there's plenty of areas left. A lot of this stuff over here in the western Mogollon range, there could easily be a population over there. So what is good soil, or what is good habitat for Graham's thistle? And so, like I said, it has to be moist soil. Because it needs to be moist, it has to be low slope so that the water isn't just shooting off of the landscape. They tend to like open meadows. They like disturbance, but not heavy disturbance. That's kind of when other things move in and they have a lot more competition. And I've found them from between 6 and 8,200 feet. And so this is actually that picture on the title slide. This is the same strip here, early season before the thistles or really anything has come up in, I think this was in late June, maybe early July, but you can see this big green stripe. This is where the moist soil is. And then as soon as you get here, dries out, you won't see any thistles in this zone going to the right. So they're very dependent on specific soil types. And this is a bit of a repeat from last year, but these guys here are really just like a keystone species to this meadow habitat, because not only do they aerate the soil, but I'm pretty sure they don't eat the thistle. And so they take a lot of the competing vegetation out of the equation. And I have yet to find a population that doesn't have the pocket gophers being very active in the same zone. And so they provide that gentle disturbance without, completely devastating the habitat. And one of the other forms of disturbance are falling trees that can basically block up. They can open up new ground for plants to grow, but they can also block water from flowing off quickly if it's on the surface. So that's one of the other major disturbances. This is another example of major disturbance, but it's beneficial. This is really early season. There's no other Graham's thistles in sight, but they're almost flowering right behind this root mass here, because you probably have a lot of water piling up here and they don't have a whole lot of competition. So these guys are really happy. And so just to recap from last year, these were the two populations that I surveyed. You have the Iron Creek population in the north, which was in 2 different drainages, but mostly in this top drainage, and then Turkey Feather Creek down here. And the Turkey Feather Creek one's interesting. The trail, a lot of you might remember, the trail used to connect to the West Fork, and it still does, but it's not very fun to hike. And I think potentially, since people don't use that area as much, I think it was often used, they had a lot of horse in that spring area because it was a great place to stop. I kind of wonder if the plant's doing better, or maybe even, I don't know, maybe they need that disturbance from the horse. I don't know, but it's doing well right now. It would be interesting if they open that trail up again, if it changed the habitat at all. But so yeah, last year I had about 4,000 individuals between these two populations. And then this is the scene this year. And so you can see you've got two new ones, both on the Middle Fork. And so this Middle Fork North is kind of just north of Iron Creek, which isn't too surprising because you've got these big populations up just upstream, and then downstream here, right at the junction of the Trotter Trail and the Middle Fork. There's some satellite imagery of that area. And so this is the Middle Fork North population. And one of the interesting things is you can kind of see that at some point the river flooded along this area here, and maybe it even used to flow over there and it just changed. But whatever happened over here, this zone here is kind of a wetland, kind of stays wet year round. It must have gotten down low enough for the water table to stay elevated in these areas. But in this section, it's only this little 100 by 100 foot square section. And so it's about 100 plants, only 13 were flowering. But I was just hiking through here and I noticed there was a lot of checker mallows. And if you're looking for Graham's thistle, look for those big purple mallows in the wet soil, because I always see those with them. So if you're seeing the checker mallow, then there's a good chance that Graham's thistle could grow there if the seed bank was there. And so, yeah, about 100 plants in this population. Trotter Trail is similar. It's got that same kind of dynamic where probably at some point this flooded out or the river ran through here. This section was bigger. I had 71 flowering plants, and I could only find 40 rosettes, but I bet there was 3 or 4 times that. But the vegetation was so thick, and it's a fragile landscape. I'm not going to just hike through there and trample everything. So it was interesting to see these two populations, because they're at 6,000 feet. The other two are at 8 or even a little bit more than 8. So the plant community is a bit different down here, but the soil is still very wet. Even this year, it was still wet. So, and so this is just a slide to kind of show how thistles are utilized by the wildlife. And as far as, the flowers, the florets, we know that's where the pollinators go, your bees, your wasps, your soldier beetles, all that stuff. When those go to seed, birds really rely on those, especially goldfinches and siskins, and hummingbirds like the flowers when they're in flower. I've seen a couple species. The leaves, painted ladies, their larval food plant are thistles. So I see a lot of caterpillars on the Graham's thistle, and I see a lot of adults feeding, grasshoppers, all of the juices inside of the plant. Aphids and plant hoppers, and then ants tend aphids on the plant, on the involucres as well. And then the stems are hollowish, and so a lot of wildlife utilizes that open space for nesting. Weevils can lay eggs in there, much to the detriment of the thistle. There's even some moth larvae that make their home inside of the stems. And this has got a lot going on it, but last year I had 28 species of butterfly that were utilizing the thistle. This year I added 8 more, so it's up to 36 species of butterfly, at least 6 species of bumblebee, 10 species of bee total, a bunch of beetles, not as many moths as I would expect, but the white-lined sphinx moth is super common during the day. I had an ant species tending some aphids. Like I said, the hummingbirds utilize the flowers when there's nectar to drink. And as far as vertebrates go, I even had Arizona tree frog kind of sheltering on the leaf here. And this is kind of your classic scene of the Graham's thistle. I feel like there's always at least 5 or 6 species on every single thistle. We've got your bumblebee here, soldier beetle. It's got some kind of true bug, a pollen beetle. There's usually a bunch of little tiny weevils in there, or a spider. Or, this one here is actually this thistle was stunted, and I was wondering why. And show you guys a little closer view here. So this one was being fed on by these aphids, and they were being tended by this species of ant. And so there's a whole bunch of different life stages of the aphids. You've got these late instar aphids that are going to be adults soon. This ant here is actually feeding on some honeydew. So the aphids suck up the plant juices, and in return for protection from the ants actually protect them, actually. They produce honeydew, and the ants actually drink that. And so they get some benefit out of protecting the aphids. They're essentially farming the aphids. But you can see there's even an egg here, some smaller instars. You've even got little sheds from where they're going into different instars. And then as adults, the aphids turn into these guys here. They're winged. And so they fly to a new thistle, start the process over again. And then, like I was saying, there's pollen beetles, weevils. I feel like there's at least 100 weevils or pollen beetles or both on each plant. Sometimes it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. And I talked about these guys the last presentation, but I learned some new things about them that are pretty interesting. So last 2 years ago, I saw this blister beetle on the thistle, and I was wondering what is it doing? It's not a pollinator. Is it looking for food? Like, what is it doing? And so I was reading about their life history, and their first instar of their young is called a triungulin, and their main function is transportation to a new food source. And so this isn't my photo, but this is what a triungulin is right here. So when the eggs hatch, this guy here, she's either laying some eggs in the flower mass, or sometimes they'll lay them in the soil close to the flower. But essentially they hatch, they come up to the flower head, and they wait for either like a bee or a fly to come by. They jump on its back, and then when that insect goes back to its nest, they jump off and eat their larva or their food source. And so what I learned this year was that there's actually triungulins that mimic female bees, solitary bees, and they'll actually emit the same pheromones as the female bees, and they'll attract a male bee to fly in, and it thinks it's going to mate. They jump on its back, and then they sit on the male until it actually finds a female. They jump on the female, and then the female flies back to her nest, and then they get off and eat the babies, basically.
No.
So
I don't believe this.
yeah, so pretty much in the insect world, if it's possible, like, they've done it. Like, it's pretty insane. So that's what these little guys are right here. Other species I've found on Graham's thistle, monarchs, they flower kind of later summer, early fall, and they provide a good food source for migrating monarchs. So it's a little early for the major influx of migrating monarchs, but certainly helping them get down south. Other ones, painted ladies, Nokomis fritillary is a species I don't see super often, but in the Graham's thistle meadows, I do see them quite often. We got your white line sphinx moth. Last year, super common. This year, not as much, probably just because of the moisture. And so what are the threats to these populations? Because they're small, they're pretty prone to being, essentially they could blink out pretty easily. And I think the biggest one is probably forest fire, which goes along with climate change. But you got a big fire that came through, could change the hydrology of the meadow. And without that moisture, this plant won't survive. So I'm sure that it's happened to meadows in the past. This plant's been around for a while, so it'd be interesting to see what it would do. Maybe the fire would open up new habitat. Other threats, hybridization, I'll get to in a minute. Disease and infestation. So you can get a lot of diseases from plant hoppers in particular, like viruses, and a lot of bacteria actually they're finding can change the DNA of some thistles. And when you have a small population like this, they're extra prone to those changes. They don't have the mass to spread out those potentially negative consequences. Bull thistle, I put a question mark. I haven't seen it be a major threat, but I do remove it in the habitat. But if we had a lot of disturbance from either feral cattle or horses or from fire, it could potentially take over an area pretty easily. So it's best to keep it out. And so with hybridizing, so in general, hybridizing is a good thing because you're adding genetic diversity and theoretically making a species stronger. But when you have these tiny populations, if you have a shift towards something through selection, it could have pretty bad results. You can't, like I was saying, you can't spread it out over, 100,000 plants. You're talking about 1,000 plants. So one of the other things is it changes the way the plants look. And as scientists, that makes our life harder, which isn't really a negative, but it can be annoying when you find a plant and you can't really key it out. And this is just something I threw in just because I found it really interesting, is that the Cirsium genus has only been in North America for 6 million years, which is it's a long time, but I expected it to be in North America for like 50 million years. I don't know. So it's relative. Its origin was Europe and Eurasia, and somehow it got to this region around 6 million years ago. Probably since their seeds are dispersed by wind, that was how it happened. And I didn't do a ton of this year, but I just wanted to go over it because I did do a lot of it in 2022. So with the Sacramento mountain thistle, these guys can be a big problem. They can cause failure of plants and lead to them not reproducing. And so there's 2 species of weevil. Lixus pervestidis is the native weevil, and it lays its eggs in the stems. And Rhinocylus conicus lays its eggs in the flower head, kind of in the involucre. And Rhinocylus was introduced to manage musk thistle, and like a lot of reintroductions, it didn't work out so well. When they were provided our native thistles, they prefer those over the musk thistle likely because they don't have the protections to fight against it. And so in the Sacramento mountains, these guys are a big problem. And so last year I surveyed over 700 plants, and then I surveyed a lot of the plants that I found in the new populations this year. And I did not find any indication that we have an issue with these guys. So they're still not in the Gila, it would seem. But yeah, they can cause failure of the plants. And since it's a 2-year cycle, if they don't succeed that second year, they're probably not going to get another chance. So it's pretty important that they're successful. And so that leads me to the final part of the presentation, which is the trip to the high Mongollons this year. And so you can see Emily over here. This is whitewater baldy, and I'm sure a lot of you guys remember this place when it had full trees, but this is what it looks like now. It's easier to get to this year than it was last year. They've done a lot of trail clearing, so it's actually, this looks terrible, but you can get up to the top pretty easily from Hummingbird Saddle. It's not terrible. And this is what the trail looked like last year. And this is a week before they cleared it. I didn't know they were going to clear it because I would have rescheduled my trip. But I basically I came from Mongollon Baldy last year, and I was hiking. I was going to camp at Hummingbird Saddle, and I got to Whitewater Baldy, which is, right at Hummingbird Saddle's right at the base of it. I was like, I'm going to be there in an hour, and it's getting dark. It's fine. It took me like 2.5 hours to go like half a mile through this stuff. It was brutal, but it's easy hiking now. They cleared the Crest Trail last fall, so if you want to go up there, I recommend it. And so this is the Thistle from last year, and this is the Thistle that still defies what it is, really. I still have no idea. But I just wanted to show you guys the plant. These are just the photos. So there were 2 of these plants last year, high on the saddle, so over 10,000 feet on Mongollon Baldy. And you can see it's got all of these weird knobby projections on the leaves. The flower mass is kind of all balled up. It is yellow, kind of like Cirsium perii. But then it's just really furry along the stem, much like Cirsium scariosum, which we're not supposed to have in this area, but it is in the White Mountains. So potentially there's some cross-contamination, maybe one blew over, I'm not sure. Another feature is it had a lot of leaf hoppers on it. And I was really hoping this year to find, even if I couldn't find this plant in particular, to find these leaf hoppers and just kind of figure out what their deal is. But it was incredibly dry this year, so the leaf hoppers were not there. And unfortunately, we could not find this plant. We couldn't even find rosettes, because you can see down here, just it doesn't look like any of the other thistles. And that could be because of the leaf hoppers. They can transmit viruses or bacteria that actually change the growth pattern of plants. And potentially that is what happened here. But I would expect to see this kind of change in other thistles, especially since, or in this area, I'll show you a picture here. This is the same spot we found the thistle, but this year you can see the prior fire is burning. It was probably like 85, 90 degrees, 10,000 feet. So it was very dry this year, very hot. But there's Perry's thistle all over up here. And since this thistle is, in fact, yellow, you would expect, well, maybe it's just a mutant Perry's thistle, but it really just seems like it's got too much going on for that to be the explanation. But unfortunately, this year we could not find it, and we scoured all of the high terrain and the Mogollons. I'll show you guys kind of our path here. So this red box here is where the high Mogollons are, and we followed this red path here. Sorry for all the waypoints. Didn't have time to take them all off, but basically the Crest Trail, we went west to Center Baldy. We're essentially just looking for duplicate habitat, which is that high terrain, open, above 10,000 feet. We checked out Willow, we checked out Whitewater Baldy, and we just couldn't find it. There wasn't a whole lot flowering except the Perry's thistle. It didn't seem to mind, but so I went up with Emily, I went up with Kyle Skaggs, and Maggie and their 2 kids came up for a half a day, And the kids were just spotting these Mogollon death camas left and right. They're really good at it. And we found over 100 of the Mogollon death camas, which is a rare plant, only grows in the Mogollons. There are a few species of death camas, and we have them in the Gila, but the main feature with these guys is you've got these purple flower-like structures. They're monocots. But yeah, over 100. So that was a great great sighting. Actually, can we go back? You can see here these little skull and crossbones. These are just little death camas spots here. We even had one down here at Center Baldy, which I know John Money, he got some money to do some death camas sighting stuff, maybe like 5 or 7 years ago. I don't think he had any down at Center Baldy, so they seem to be doing okay. It was certainly one of the easier rare plants to find, but there are a lot of rare plants up there, and the habitat's pretty different from when they used to be more abundant. And so these were 3 of the other species we were looking for. And like I said, it was very dry. Things weren't flowering. We were using binoculars to scan for Hess's fleabane on the rock taluses, because that's where they grow. And if they were there, we probably just couldn't see them because there weren't any white flowers. These other species, the ragwort and the hawkweed, are kind of more dependent on forested habitats, which we weren't spending as much time in, and there aren't as many of those habitats left, so we weren't able to find those either. But we did find some other cool stuff. These aren't rare plants, but they were all pretty. These are all things we found on whitewater baldy. I really like these Penstemon lipolanus, some sheep sorrel. I really like these sedums too. Really cool. This is your, super abundant Cirsium perrii. And then we had a ton of these guys, and they're like the biggest ones. Emily's really into these greater shorthorn lizards, and they're huge. Like, we'll find them well over 10,000 feet. And I've even found them in October at over 10,000 feet. So they love it up there. We found a ton of these guys. But perhaps the biggest sighting of the trip was this bumblebee here. So this is your Penstemon lipolanus, but this bee is a western bumblebee, Bombus occidentalis, which is endangered in Oregon and California, and pretty much never found in the state. It's very low occupancy for New Mexico. And this was the first sighting in the Mogollon since 1961. And so 60 years, the last one was seen at Willow Creek, and it's at the very southern end of its range. So this one in particular was at the very top of whitewater baldy. So I think they're kind of running out of habitat, but they're still here despite the fires. This is a slide that I found that kind of shows the occupancy of the species, and it's a pretty interesting but sad story with this species. So why it's doing so bad isn't just climate change. At some point, someone decided they were going to pick this bee to basically force to come out in the winter to pollinate greenhouse tomatoes, which was like a huge business. And they wouldn't let people do it in the US, but they would let them ship them to Europe where they would do it and then send them back. And for the longest time, like the lobby, apparently this was like a multi-billion-dollar business. The lobby for the greenhouse tomatoes was pushing Fish and Wildlife to let them rear the bees in the US, but they didn't want to bring them back from Europe because they were scared of disease. And after a few years of pressuring Fish and Wildlife, they succeeded. And then not long after that, it did bring back disease, and it actually crashed this bee that used to be incredibly abundant, actually caused another bee, the Franklin's bumblebee over here, to go extinct. So essentially, since in the last 20 years, this bee has declined like 40% over its range. And in certain states like in California and Oregon, it's actually listed as endangered. I think it would also be in New Mexico, but we don't really recognize insects as animals in this state. But you can see it's always been a very low occupancy level for New Mexico. And so right here is where I found that one. So there's not really even any data points. So it's very, very cool that we have this bee here. And maybe the Gila has provided refuge from disease, and it just hasn't had to worry. And I do have a video, an updated video. This is kind of, will show you what it's like to just walk around in the Graham's thistle habitat, which I encourage everyone to do. The easiest way is to get to the Iron Creek trailhead, which is just off of Willow Creek, and it's about 3 miles in, 2.5 miles in, and then you're like right in this spot, right in the heart of this population. So you can see a lot of the different feeding strategies for the bees. It's pretty fun to see how they all do it kind of differently, but sometimes they don't get along. that guy at the end was actually a robber fly that was eating the painted lady, and they mimic a tarantula hawk, and so the butterflies don't see them as predators because tarantula hawks aren't going to eat a butterfly, and so they can just swoop in. And like when I was there, I saw like 5 or 6 painted ladies get picked off because so you have this like huge resource, all these thistles bringing in all these pollinators, and then it's also going to bring in all of the predators. So everybody gets attracted to the high resource zones. Oops, start it again. So I just threw this together just to kind of summarize what the project has accomplished the last couple of years. And so I found 4 populations of Graham's thistle. Time will tell with the other thistle. We need to find it again. That's the issue. I really wish I would have collected it last year. So the persistence record for the Western bumblebee is huge, and potential funding possibilities in the future, because it's hard to find this bee anywhere in the Southwest. And then places like California, Oregon, they don't see the species almost at all. So it's very strange that it's still here, and it would be interesting to find out to what degree it is here. So if you guys are ever out and you're looking at flowers and you see a bee with a white butt and you're kind of like higher up in elevation, I would record it, put it on iNaturalist or send me a photo or something, because that's really important information. I also have some Graham's thistle I'd like to put in the herbarium here. I know UNM wants one as well, but priority is here first. Hoping to get out a report for the Forest Service about the Graham's thistle, and maybe about the bee. I'm not sure. I have alerted them that I did find the bee, but like I said, insects in our state are generally not protected. There are a few. They basically have to be federally listed in order to be protected in the state, which is unfortunate. And then, yeah, this is my 3rd presentation about the thistle. So I'm hopeful that people are learning about its presence and hopefully want to go see it. It'd be cool to have a field trip to take people out to see it when it's flowering, because it's really fun to see what comes into the flowers. And then this last one, Cirsium Society has this great document of all of the pollinators for each thistle species, and for Graham's thistle, they essentially had no records for any. So all of those sightings of the 36 butterfly species and all that is going to go to Cirsium Society for that information. And I'd just like to thank the Carter Conservation Fund, Gila Native Plant Society, Native Plant Society of New Mexico for funding this research the last 2 years. Without that money, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Forest Service for managing the Gila and making it so accessible for research, and Heart of the Gila, of course, for getting me out there, paying me to look for plants initially. And if I wasn't doing that, I wouldn't have found this thistle. So thank you to all those people. And I had this in here last year, but one of those sightings, one of the populations I found, I didn't actually find. On the Middle Fork, somebody had posted a Graham's thistle from 2019 at that trotter trail. And that's how I even knew to look there, because I basically surveyed all of the Middle Fork except this little section between Snow Lake and the trotter trail. And there were 2 populations there. So without iNaturalist, I would not have known that was there. So it's very useful. It's fun. If you're looking for IDs on things, it can be a great resource. And that's it.
Thank you.
Any questions? Yeah.
I know that the varroa mite is a problem for honeybees.
Yeah.
What is the disease that the Bombus occidentalis?
It's like a fungal thing. I can't remember the name of it, but so there's like a group of bumblebees called Pyrobombus, and it encompasses like 4 or 5 species. And the Western bumblebee is one of them. The Franklin's bumblebee was also one of them, and that's now extinct. So whatever it is, it focuses on that group of bumblebees more than any other. So
it's a fungus, not a mite.
no, it's not a mite.
That's Betty. That's
Oh. Wasn't sure where that was going. Any other questions?
Get those things in the middle, but I don't know how to do it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Andy?
You said there were only like 3 species of moth that you documented on.
Yeah, 4.
Is that because you were in there out in daylight and didn't?
Yeah, so I kind of regret not, because I like moths a lot, and I have a black light, but I usually was hiking so much by the end of the day, I was like, I just can't stay awake. And so I didn't, all the moths that I've recorded were on the flowers during the day.
So there's probably quite a few more.
Yeah, almost certainly. I'm sure there's some moth species that have larvae that rely specifically on this plant, and that would be interesting to find out.
Yeah. Well, you need more funding soon.
Yeah. So I can just stay up. Russ?
Like White's cabin would be the perfect place for this.
Yeah. I didn't go up there,
So speaker.
but
There's
yeah.
a huge meadow around that cabin that's moist.
Yeah.
This work.
Huh.
Near,
Oh, I actually did go there, actually. I did not find it. There was one plant, and it wasn't on my map, but it was just downstream of Turkey Feather Creek. I imagine the seed just got washed down to the West Fork. And yeah, but I did search the West Fork there. I didn't find it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But maybe it'll be there eventually. It'd be interesting to know like how much of a seed bank there is for this plant, like spread across the forest, because all these seeds just fly up into the air, and chances are they're going to land somewhere that it can't grow. And what happens in that situation? Like the habitat is just so limited. It has to either basically fall on the ground right next to its parent, or just magically land somewhere perfect far away. It's kind of amazing that it's still around.
Just a little comment. I really enjoyed that, your presentation here, John. You had a photo of Richter Hessii,
Yeah.
I think. I suspect, if I'm wrong, we had a botanist here in the late 60s, William Hess. And he went on to, I think, botanical garden. He didn't stay in academia, but I think it's named after someone who taught here for about 3 years.
That's cool.
Well, actually from your home state.
Oh, yeah.
You're from Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
Originally? Yeah, he passed away a few years ago. He was in his late 80s, but he wrote the treatment of a lot of the agaves and yuccas of North America, and went on to a pretty distinguished academic career, but he was here for a few years.
Huh.
During the
when was that?
Zimmerman years.
Oh, okay.
So
That's great photo.
you can find that plant along Rocky Cliffs. So that was Savinsky's picture, right?
I think that was my picture.
Okay, well, I've seen that plant. It's not common anywhere,
Okay.
but I've seen it in the rocks and cliffs, too, not just on telestones.
Okay. Oh, wait. Yeah, sorry. I was thinking of a different plant. You're right. That wasn't my photo.
That was Savinsky's photo, I think.
Yeah.
I was with him when he took that,
Oh, okay.
and that plant was on a rocky cliff.
Interesting. Do you know like what kind of elevation or?
You've been there.
Okay.
Between Hummingbird Saddle and Mongollon.
Okay. So still really high up. Yeah, I thought we would find that plant honestly, but I think we would have if it wasn't so dry. I just think they were everything pushed off flowering late this year. So I think if we would have gone like late August, then it maybe would have been a better trip, but you know, it seems like early August, you'd be fine, like you'd be like running away from lightning storms and whatever, but it was just like, you know, mid-July or mid-June even
Do you
weather-wise.
have any more funding? Are you gonna be able to go back next year?
I haven't applied yet, but I would certainly like more funding. But yeah. Any other questions?
So there's a few botany majors who are in here attending the presentation, and you have really made the case that if you're majoring in botany, you need to take an insect class. You really made the case very well.
Yeah.
So, one of the few people.
The insects are my favorite.
One of these students getting ready to graduate, but
Yeah,
you have this opportunity.
I mean, especially with like bees, there's a lot of work with bees if you're looking for jobs after school, like after graduating, like they're looking for bee experts. They've got a lot of funding, so learn your bees.
Yeah. I'll be offered next fall, Dr. Jost.
Well, yeah, that is my goal for my master's.
Okay.
But yeah, somebody could do a research thing on the western bumblebee and the Gila. Be interesting.
Jackie Blurton brought refreshments, which are out in the hall. And I want to remind everybody that December 10th is our holiday lunch potluck, and we will be sending out a reminder to all the members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there-
Wonder what'll happen next year. Yeah, you never get. Two major floods.
Oh, this is my first semester here. I did about a semester.
What about the roof structure? Are they reverse?
No,
Northern Midwestern.
right here.
Where are you from?
No, they're not.
They could just be gobbling right down.
Yeah. Right here is actually.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Pretty shallow, not, I mean, it kind of makes sense. The soil's like pretty intense, it's really wet.
Yeah, so we have to, it's amazing that you can store enough energy in that.
Yeah, I didn't mention it, but this year, you know, it was really dry even in the meadow.
Yeah.
And the flower, like the flower heads are so much smaller than here, and they just have way fewer florets.
Yeah, oh yeah, I go up to Milwaukee.
I know, we just need a normal year.
Yeah, right. Well, if we have 2 dry years in a row.
Yeah, with.
I already told it to you, we're above average.
Yeah, I'm just not looking at
Yeah,
it. Right?
breaks to, or year break to figure out what I want to do, and I ended up doing that.
I envy you the hiking.
And
Oh, yeah.
originally I was gonna go for bobcats, but then I heard you guys had forestry wildlife. I'm like, oh shoot, I feel like that combines like everything I want. So.
Yeah, you can take, you don't have many people majoring in botany here, a couple exceptions. But most of the classes, many of the classes they're in the botany classes, people in forest wildlife majors take.
Yeah.
The botany majors, things will take physiology, and that's University of biology majors take. Yeah, so it's all, we have all these different degree programs in this department, and students end up, you know, in the class that you're in, there's something majors are there and there, we've got spec majors or minor in biology. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, like I said, I already took botany back at community college, so I was a little sad I couldn't take it again, but.
Well, just love the opportunity as you move along.
Oh,
You
yeah.
mentioned the Illinois connection, you just heard this too. Certainly always talk about the Green Bay Packers. I taught high school
yeah.
right outside of Green Bay for almost a decade.
Oh, yeah, my whole family's cheeseheads.
I have a cheesehead in my office. My wife is Green Bay, that's where I met her. Yeah, my mother and sister-in-law are still, I was just there this. So, yeah, so, but I've been here 23 years, so I'm in Texas again.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
My family's back in the Midwest, my sibling, St. Louis. So,
I mean, my grandma managed a campground, Jefferson County in between Madison and Milwaukee for quite a few years. Like, I was the fourth generation to actually go to that campground. Like my grandfather like went there.
there's a Jefferson County in Wisconsin.
Mhm.
I believe you, and it's been a while, since
Yeah.
30 years, but I'm there every summer. Between Madison and Milwaukee, yeah, usually
I'm always welcome.
I do a lot of research in Iowa. I'll come up to Dubuque, up to Madison, and then I'll go up there to Waupun and then to Oshkosh, and that route I've done dozens of times. That route between Milwaukee and Madison, not so much, but.
It's, I think the closest, like, biggest town is probably Mongollon.
All right, yeah, I've definitely heard of that.
Yeah, and it's so nice up here, because you just, I do miss the Midwest sometimes, because I miss I miss living near a lake. We lived in the chain of lakes in Illinois for the biggest time. So I miss it sometimes, but I really enjoy it out here.
Tell me again where you're from, dude? You still?
Moriarty, so Terrence.
Yeah.
Everybody's.
You don't have to be a member to have a cookbook.
Oh, thank you.
How often do y'all meet?
That's right. I seem to remember that, and I think Logan was you know Logan?
Yes,
That's where I was.
Never ran into Facebook. I remember one of our classes, I said, oh, I'm from.
I've been able to do a couple of my past, like
You're in the
Oregon
Midwest.
and Illinois, and I love doing it.
Don't give me any
Get some
crap.
frustration out, get the hori out.
Give me crap for you.
Yeah, it would be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with that bull thistle. Get up
Yeah,
there.
so.
Yeah.
I'm not done, so Harris, Moriarty, is that North Las Vegas?
Is it, I don't know.
That's probably.
Is it North Las Vegas?
No, it's south.
Thank you.
I also lived up in Terrace for a bit, so.
Yeah, so I don't know northern New Mexico very well at all, but my wife and I, the day after
Yeah,
Christmas,
they are strong.
with a friend, we're gonna drive up to Gallup. We're never gonna spend the night, there's a train that goes from Gallup to Las Vegas, so we're there. Yeah, in San Miguel County, and spend the night there, then we're just like train, just kind of chill out. I've been living in this state for over 22 years. I know Southwestern, I don't know that part John's talking about. I haven't, I'm in this, but I'm not explored much of the rest of the state at all. It's a big state, and summers I'm on visiting family. I get a lot of research projects.
That is cool.
So you are taking classes now?
Mhm. Yep, hopefully graduating in 26, hopefully, maybe, but, most of anybody in my family went to college eventually, became a teacher professor, so it's kind of been hammered into me, like, take longer. Take a longer time, do really well in it, so if I take a little longer, there's, so, yeah, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what I want to do. I think I just want to be outside of it, right? So.
Yeah, that's why I like to teach, why I got in this business. Birds and plants, I like being outside. I grew up in a rural, actually, my elderly parents are still in the same rural street corner where I grew up, they're not the same house. But so I go visit them, and since you know, I got trapped there for 2 weeks last December because of that big storm that came through Christmas, but snow, I had to go help my 88-year-old dad, he ran the snow blower, and I did the shoveling, and different world.
I'm just lucky I didn't grow up where my other side of the family grew up. My dad's side of the family from North Dakota, and my grandma lives by herself, and she'd be like, oh yeah, we just got 3 feet of snow. I'm like, don't tell me that. I'm worried about you. Don't tell me that.
I was talking to my mom on Sunday, she's gonna be 84 here in a couple of weeks. So, Mom, you got any snow? I guess there's a little bit on the roof, of this big metal garage they have, it slid off the roof and it's still persisting on the ground.
Oh, man.
Time I get up there in about a month, probably a couple feet of snow on the ground.
I don't miss that. I don't miss that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went back for Christmas a couple years ago, and my friend's like, do you wanna hang out? I'm like, well, he's a town away, and it's a blizzard, but I might as well. Yeah, I think that's the one thing I still can do is like still brag about it. Drivers get this not so much.
So maybe I've already had this discussion with you. I had a student about 4 or 5 years, her name was Kelsey Bailey. She's from Aurora. Is that,
Oh.
Bailey's not that uncommon a name.
I'll have to ask her.
Yeah, she now is in Michigan with, working in a rehab center for exotic animals.
That is cool.
Yeah, so you're the second
Yeah.
person that's married to, I had over 1,000 students here. I don't know where to go to, but.
That's cool.
But I got to know Kelsey pretty well. So.
I'll have to ask around and see if the.
Kelsey Bailey, KELSSIE, and her dad, they run a roofing business. She was very unlike me, very handy. And she said, Kelsey, would you also, my dad, my brother's out putting roof, jamming the roofs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
That is so.
what are you taking for classes now?
It's not a good.
Well, right now I'm taking Chem 1, Gen Chem 1, the online Spanish 1 and 2, but I'm changing to Bachelor of Science next semester because I don't feel like I'm learning Spanish very well online. And then
Nobody's ever for 6 months.
Comp 2. So next semester I'm taking Chem 2,
It's interesting to talk.
Animal Form and Function,
Yeah, definitely.
Western Civ, and
You get any?
Intro to Computer Science.
Well, I guess it wouldn't be bio, but, the.
Remember it eventually.
Can I rattle that again, Devin? What's your last name?
Scott.
It's usually fine.
It's bio
Scott.
yeah.
Scott,
Like
okay,
Scotland.
okay.
Thank you.
Can I get you a plate? Here's some
They are, they just.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Growing young men here.
They are not.
I know. Yeah.
not gonna wait all
day.
Thank you so much.
Here's some juice. You guys can keep.
Even though it's-
Thanks for giving. I know her, I can give her credit,
Always happy.
but you give it right back.
Homemade,
Thank you.
gluten-free honey peanut butter pecan cookies, I think.
So next time you're in my office,
Wow.
God, I've got all these, you've been in my office a few times, haven't you? Maybe
Wow.
got all these bird pictures hanging up. Now I'm in his birds as much as I have plants. I've got a whole bunch of artwork of owls. The top one she did.
Oh, okay.
She's a really good artist.
That's cool.
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah, I used to work with Foster's.
have mango and.
Cause I volunteered at, it's a animal rescue out in Paris.
Jackie,
So I used to work with like vultures, caracaras.
Wow.
Great presentation. Thanks.
I like the way you tie, I really like the way you tie that insect. You know, it's all like all one thing. You know?
Yeah.
It's not like, these are the plants, they're all, like the way you talk about, you know, a little bit of disturbance, but not too much. Cool stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of just like, I don't, that's what my observation is,
Yeah,
but it's not,
Do you go off?
it's not researched.
We're not on that forest to go birding?
yeah,
That's just like what I've seen.
that's what you picked up on. That's what
Yeah.
you- And that's cool.
Yeah.
How did you determine that that little
That's why I go
pocket
hiking.
gourd does not eat these thistles?
That I don't know for sure. That's why I said it. It seems like it doesn't.
I was wondering why, you think.
Because I just feel like I see these areas and the thistle is so thick.
They're not being.
Yeah, they're not being thin. That they must not be very good, at least. If they do eat them, they don't eat
Well,
them.
I decided that.
It's like
I wanted to
the
pick a
dominant
college,
plant.
maybe in the fall.
Interesting.
Well, even if they do, it sounds like maybe they should, habitat
A lot of trees.
overcompensate for any damage that they do.
Right.
I mean, maybe they're farming these things, I mean, they
Yeah,
till,
that's really.
They till the soil, and then they grow in such numbers that they don't have to harvest them all.
I mean, it really does benefit them though to have that open space that much here. They can get really big, spread out.
That'll be the second weekend trip.
And soft soil.
I'll teach a whole bunch of different
Yeah.
classes, so.
How many times?
Okay, well.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I hope you get to get back out there and do some more.
No.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be out there regardless, but
Yeah. Oh, you gotta get out there and get paid.
yeah, I know.
Pay big bucks to do
The
it.
bands that got the geology.
No. And your presentations have gotta help.
I think I was.
I mean, these are good
sure I was
Thanks.
same day one of the bands was, so I might have had
Okay.
some money or something.
So we'll see you.
Yeah,
Get together
definitely.
soon. Okay.
Sounds good.
Favorite place.
You too.
Yeah, I think like that's what I really fell in love with.
Oh.
Is, you know, because I love it. You don't get to see views like that.
Yeah, that's what I tell them. I do have some fun time in Iowa doing strong grad school. And I tell them, you know, it's got its own beauty and I'm not gonna say it's any better or any worse than here.
It's different.
Yeah, everything's on a smaller scale.
I mean,
I've lived in a lot of them. I live here longer than where I've lived in my life. This is home now and I'll be retiring in 3 or 4 years. I'll be here for a few more years.
that's good. That's good. Don't leave me.
You know, and I'm not counting the days, but. Hope somebody else will come.
Yeah.
I lived in Iowa for 9 years, lived in Wisconsin for 9 years, grew up in Michigan, and they're all great places.
Yeah, when I was getting my schedule sorted out with Mr. Pagos, he did not stop singing your praises. He was like, you gotta take Dr. Norris. You gotta take one of his classes at least.
Thrive on games. You'll have plant techs on with Dr. Klein and take some on from him too. Russ, you met these two?
No.
Jude and Devin.
Nice to meet you.
Botany and zoology, double major for, I just met this guy here tonight.
I think I've got chemistry right after your class.
Oh,
I think I see you.
oh, yeah, with Sheila.
Yeah, he's the coolest.
Night back here.
Oh, I just met him. Oh, I didn't recognize Michael, actually.
Yeah.
The year older than a beard.
And those things happen, you know, I couldn't grow a beard like that when I was your age, you know, in my early 20s, so. Nice.
And she said, this makes every.
Nice meeting you, I'm sorry.
This,
Nice to meet you too.
this meets, I don't think we'll have a meeting next month, it's, the 3rd Friday of the month, which is what this is, I think, this is 17th, you have to do the math on that.
White line.
And it'll meet again, it'll be, I don't know if the room is in February, both in March and first in April, and one in May. Usually they kind of knock off in the summer, because it's really hot and people are gone.
Yeah.
Then they resume, I don't know what the program was last month.
The White Ridge is.
So I often, I'm not because I'm not, I'm glad I'm here, I'm not complaining. Friday night, I usually just kind of spend.
Okay.
And, yeah, you know, but I know I'm playing with
Yeah.
John, I know he's a
The
really good
Cirsium
speaker.
keyway.
Yeah, we're trying to by you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I came, I live less than a mile from here.
Yeah.
That was such a cool presentation. If I could have that job every day, I would just spend a life.
Yeah, so you can, anyway. So Forest wildlife, not law enforcement, forest wildlife.
No, just forest wildlife, nice meeting you, with a minor in outdoor leadership. I think, you know, I'd be happy doing that.
Kathy got you in that wilderness first responder class in the spring.
Not yet.
See you later, Bill.
See you later, Sydney, see you later, Mike,
See you later.
bye.
Not quite yet, but looking forward to taking it whenever I can.
Yeah, so you've talked with Dr. Whiteman, you know who she is?
I know of her. I haven't talked with her yet.
You know Will Tracy, because you just mentioned his name. All I can tell you, and I am not the advisor of the outdoor leadership. I advise a whole bunch of forest wildlife majors, not everybody, but if Jay does some, but what I'm hearing from Dr. Whiteman is that if you're pursuing an outdoor leadership minor, you might sign up for that wilderness first responder course. It's not offered by anyone.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you know, Jay's on top of things up there. That degree, and then there's a sustainable development degree. I just met with somebody a couple hours ago. A lot of those courses are offered every other year. If you don't catch them when they're offered, no one's gonna stick around 2 years for class, but so I really try to keep my brain wrapped around class. And I've got a real good handle on when our courses are offered, but Dr. Whiteman, you know, she's and Will's gonna know, I've gotten to know him. Need to ask him what class. You need to really sit down probably with Dr. Whiteman and just kind of basically kind of make a plan as far as what courses you're gonna take for this leadership minor.
Thank you. That's really helpful because I think sometimes I get a little overwhelmed with all of it. Like, oh gosh, there's so many people to talk to, but that really helps.
You know, and I bought you, so Jay's been advising you.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's on top of things. for sure.
I have been meaning to talk to Jost a little bit and more about it, just make sure I'm doing things right.
One thing, yeah, so. Spring, you're taking ecology, I presume you're taking animal FFD.
Yeah.
Fall, you're gonna take for zoology. So a class that's required on your degree plan, you can either take it in the spring or in 2 years is Evolution University of Plants. And then Sydney, who you just met, she's a little further along, she's graduating a couple semesters.
Okay.
She'll be taking, no, she actually had that, but she'll be taking plant physiology, so those courses are offered.
Got it, I'm gonna say just gotta watch the.
Yeah, and I got a pretty good handle on.
Yeah.
All this courses, it's not the outdoor leadership so much, it's like, Dr. White, crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was so cool talking to Will Tracy, because it like, I had no idea that this was even an option for a minor, but it is just so neat. And it feels like this school just like perfectly fell into my lap. Like it's decently close to my parents, but not close enough.
Where are your parents living now?
And this, yeah, they've got a camper down there that I was living in the last year with also my brother. So I like being up here, it's nice.
Did you ever meet, you're in the 9 o'clock class, Naomi Kimball Earl? She's on the volleyball team, she's from Animus. She's taking the same class as you taking, but a different section. I call her the queen of Animus, because we all, Animus is pretty small. But,
Yeah, I really only know people in the like trailer court that I live in, which, not many people, but it's Animus.
oh, 20 people, you know everybody, right?
Exactly. Well, it was really great meeting you. and getting to talk
Likewise.
to you.
Yeah, glad you came out, and I learned a lot when I saw John's presentation.
So neat.
Yeah, I'm just really emphasizing, I had a great entomology class 24 years ago, do the math, that was 1980. When I was your age, I still remember some of it, but I don't have John's knowledge, or Dr. Joe's teaches a really good entomology class here.
I'm so excited. I wish I could take everything.
Yeah, and maybe you can, if you're independently wealthy, you could be a professional student.
See you Monday after next.
Bye. Yeah, that's right, we got a week off. I got a test, I got to correct.
There's only. Those are the folks that think they're going to. Especially talking about. The inside of the park's got like. The other 400. Yeah. We're lacking 7 species still.
Don't have a compound scope, I've got a dissecting scope.
They're cheap though.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, but here's the deal, for doing mosses, you don't need anything past 100 heads.
Okay, mine comes up to 75.
Yeah, I bought a $50 children's toy scope. So I went to Alaska about 10 years ago with Brian. And I didn't want to carry a microscope up there, but I wanted to do microscope. I wanted to do bright lights in hotel or wherever I was staying in England. So when I got to Anchorage, I bought it like $49.95 kids science scope. Right. And it said up to 1,000 axes. Right. And anything past 100 is bullshit. But it did just fine enough. I could see it in that. So for almost nothing, you can get a compound that'll work. And a real AM scope, which is a good low end, but well serviceable brand. You get a used one for $100 easy.
Yeah. Yeah, good night, guys.
If you have a need, John, to use it, maybe you don't, I heard you say, but. Just coming here working, we've always got scopes up in there.
Okay.
It's really interesting, you got the Forest Service, I know you're a consultant. I very seldom see Forest Service people here, and of course, I don't get up in the Forest Service offices too much, and. It just seems like there's this divide.
Well, yeah, this is great. Forest Service has one.
There's actually some pretty good specimens on there. Yeah, it's not as big as ours, but, yeah, it's a good resource.
Yeah. Do you guys have an insect collection too?
Yeah, you met Amanda?
I have, but I need to see if there's any other Western bubble. Yeah. specimens. Would be interesting.
Yeah, and you obviously know a whole heck of a lot. She really knows it.
Yeah.
She's really, really bright. I sent her a picture years ago, because, you know, people know me, hey, Bill, what's this law? Sure. Now I know you have an interest in laws. I sent this picture to Amanda, 10 minutes later, boom. Yeah, the species, she just banged it right out. It was more than just geometry day. I mean,
it on Google and.
Yeah.
no, she just has a tremendous knowledge.
She was really, really good.